The blizzard roared. A Marine fell to his knees, watching his K9 disappear into the white abyss. But when a child's cry echoed through the storm, that beast returned, bleeding, yet unbroken. What followed wasn't just a rescue, it was a miracle that melted every frozen heart in Fairview. Before we begin, tell us where you're watching from, and subscribe for more stories of faith, courage, and the miracles God hides in the darkest places. Snow fell thick over Fairview, Montana, turning the police training yard into a white, trembling canvas. The air bit through layers of fabric, searing any exposed skin with the sting of ice. Beyond the steel fence, a deep, guttural bark shattered the stillness. A bark so fierce it seemed to split the frozen air in two. Men paused mid-step. The sound came again, louder this time, echoing off the concrete walls of the K9 division. Inside the reinforced kennel, a German shepherd named Odin prowled in circles. His fur, a blend of black and bronze, shimmered faintly beneath the harsh, fluorescent lights. The years had sculpted him into a magnificent but scarred creature. One ear bent slightly from an old wound, one eye clouded faintly from a battle long past. At 7 years old, Odin was no longer the proud police legend of Fairview. He was its warning. He had saved lives once, but after the death of his handler, he had turned volatile. Every attempt to retrain him had ended in blood or fear. Now, behind the safety glass, Ethan Cole stood silently, watching. At 30, Ethan was new to the precinct. A young Marine veteran recently transferred from the city's military K9 rehabilitation unit. Tall, broad-shouldered, with close-cropped brown hair and a face hardened by both wind and war, he looked like a man who had seen too much too soon. His jaw bore a faint scar, a gift from shrapnel overseas, and his green eyes held a quiet storm of memories. Those who met him once described him as polite but distant, a man built from discipline and guilt. Beside him, Sergeant Wade Turner, a graying man in his 50s with a rough, wind-burned face, leaned against the glass. "That one's a lost cause," he muttered, voice low and gravelly. "Broke a handler's arm 2 months ago. Refuses to eat unless it's from a metal bowl. And even then, half the time he flips it over." Ethan didn't answer. His gaze stayed fixed on Odin, tracing the restless movement of paws against the floor. The dog's claws clicked rhythmically, like a clock counting down. The longer Ethan watched, the more he saw something others didn't. Not violence, but anguish. When Odin suddenly stopped pacing and turned toward the window, their eyes met. For a second, Ethan felt an ache that reached deep into his chest. It was the same look he had seen in the mirror years ago, the look of someone left behind. "He's not angry," Ethan said quietly. "He's grieving." Wade scoffed. "Grieving? He nearly tore a man apart." Ethan took a slow breath. "You ever lose someone who was your only reason to fight?" The older man hesitated. His weathered face softened just a little. "I did," he admitted. "But I didn't bite people afterward." Ethan smiled faintly. "That's because no one ever muzzled your pain." He stepped closer to the glass. Odin's growl rumbled deep, a low, warning sound that seemed to shake the floor. Yet Ethan didn't flinch. He simply observed the creature's breathing, rapid, defensive, fearful. The scent of cold metal and disinfectant filled the corridor. Behind him, the hallway lights flickered. "He's dangerous, Cole," Wade said, his voice sharpening. "I've seen men like him. Dogs, too. Once they cross that line, they don't come back." Ethan's eyes stayed locked on Odin. Everyone crosses lines when they lose faith, he murmured. My job is to remind them what stands on the other side. Later that afternoon, Ethan signed the assignment papers, volunteering to assess Odin's condition. The other handlers exchanged glances that mixed disbelief with pity. One of them, a young officer named Maria Lopez, whispered as she passed him, "You're brave, or stupid." She was small and wiry, with quick eyes and a kindness that couldn't quite mask her fear. "I'll let you know which," Ethan said, offering a half-smile before stepping into the observation chamber. The door hissed shut behind him. Through the reinforced cage, Odin froze mid-step, eyes narrowing. Ethan could hear his own heartbeat echo in his ears. He crouched slightly, body relaxed, voice low but steady. "It's just me, pal," he said softly. "I'm not here to take anything from you." Odin's tail was stiff, his body rigid. The sound that came from his throat wasn't quite a growl, more like a warning born from habit than hate. Ethan slowly removed his gloves, revealing calloused hands marked by old burns. He placed one on the ground, palm flat. The dog's gaze flicked from the hand to the man's face. A moment passed, long, fragile. Then Odin turned away and retreated to the corner. Ethan exhaled. "Yeah," he murmured. "That's what I thought. You don't hate people. You just don't trust them anymore." When he exited the chamber, Wade was waiting with crossed arms. "You didn't get bit," he said, half surprised, half impressed. "Not today," Ethan replied, stripping off his vest. His breath formed clouds in the freezing air. "He's got fight left in him. He just needs to remember why." Wade frowned. "That dog's seen hell, son. Maybe he belongs there." Ethan looked back toward the glass, where Odin stood motionless, staring at the door he had just exited. "I've seen hell too," Ethan said quietly. "Doesn't mean I plan on staying." That night, as the snow deepened outside the barracks, Ethan lay awake on the narrow cot assigned to him. The heater rattled weakly in the corner. His thoughts drifted, uninvited, back to a desert halfway across the world. The sand, the explosion, the radio static before silence. He had buried too many friends, but one memory refused to fade. The moment his unit's K9, a shepherd named Duke, had died saving him from shrapnel. That guilt had never healed, only hardened. Perhaps that's why he had come here, to repay a debt no one had asked for. He sat up, running a hand through his hair. Outside, the wind howled against the window, and in the distance, faint but unmistakable, came a bark. Odin's bark. It wasn't angry this time. It was lonely. Ethan stood, walked to the window, and stared out into the snowy dark. "We'll get there, buddy," he whispered. "Just you and me." And somewhere in the frozen yard, as the snow continued to fall, the beast that everyone feared lowered his head and went silent, as if he too was listening. Night settled heavy over Fairview. Snow fell in quiet sheets, blanketing the streets in silence and turning the police compound into a fortress of cold light and long shadows. Inside the training wing, the hum of fluorescent lamps was the only sound. Ethan Cole sat alone at a steel desk, his breath fogging faintly in the chilled air. Before him lay a thin brown folder marked K917 Odin. The edges of the paper were worn, the ink faded by years of handling. Ethan opened it carefully, as though the pages might burn. The report was brief and clinical. Subject shows severe behavioral regression after loss of primary handler, Sergeant James Miller. Considered unfit for further service. Recommended termination. Below the text, a photograph was clipped. A young man in uniform kneeling beside a bright-eyed German shepherd. Both looked proud, confident, unaware that one would soon become a ghost and the other a warning. Ethan traced the corner of the photo with his gloved thumb. James Miller, he murmured. The name stirred something distant inside him. Ethan had lost men too. One in particular, Corporal Ryan Hale, his best friend since boot camp. Hale had died in Afghanistan, shielding Ethan from a mortar blast. That day had carved something permanent in his chest, guilt dressed as loyalty. Perhaps that was why Odin's story hit so hard. Footsteps echoed down the corridor. Sergeant Wade Turner entered, his boots leaving wet prints on the concrete. "You're still here," he grunted. "Most men would have gone home hours ago." He tossed a steaming cup of coffee on the desk. "Black. No sugar. You look like you could use it." Ethan accepted the cup with a nod. "Thanks." He paused before asking, "What was Miller like?" Wade leaned against the wall, folding his arms. "Good man, quiet. The kind of soldier who didn't speak much but made everyone else feel safe. He trained Odin himself, took that pup from a rescue shelter. They were inseparable." His gaze drifted toward the kennels beyond the glass. "When Miller died, it broke that dog in half. I've seen grief before, Cole, but not like that. It's like Odin never left the battlefield." The sergeant's voice softened as he continued. "I remember the day they brought him back. Odin kept searching the convoy for Miller's scent. Wouldn't eat for 3 days. Then one night he just snapped. Bit his own handler, tore through the gates. After that, he was never the same." Ethan listened silently, fingers tightening around the coffee cup. The heater rattled again, coughing out thin waves of warmth. "Maybe he's not supposed to be the same," Ethan said finally. "Neither are we." Wade gave a weary chuckle. "You talk like a man twice your age." Ethan smiled faintly. "War does that." Hours passed. The sergeant left, and the compound grew quiet. Ethan found himself drawn again toward Odin's kennel. The lights had dimmed to a low amber glow, and frost had crept along the glass. Inside, Odin lay curled in the corner, his massive frame rising and falling with each slow breath. Ethan crouched down, speaking softly through the bars. "You and I aren't so different, are we?" he whispered. "Both of us stuck somewhere between who we were and who they want us to be." Odin's ears twitched. He opened one golden eye, watching the man in silence. Then came a low sound, not a growl this time, but a soft, uncertain whine. Ethan felt his throat tighten. "Yeah," he murmured. "I hear you." The moment was interrupted by the metallic click of boots. A new voice called out, low and crisp. "You're not supposed to be near that cage after hours." Ethan turned. Standing in the doorway was Captain Laura Brenner, head of the K-9 division. She was in her early 40s, tall and lean, with pale skin and sharp blue eyes that missed nothing. Her dark hair was tied neatly at the back of her neck, streaked with the faintest hint of gray. She carried herself with the calm precision of someone who'd learned control the hard way. "Just observing," Ethan replied evenly. Laura stepped closer, folding a file against her chest. "Observation is fine. Getting attached isn't." Her tone was even, but there was something brittle beneath it. "I've seen too many handlers break trying to save a dog that couldn't be saved." Ethan rose slowly. "Maybe the problem isn't the dog." Her gaze hardened. "You think you can fix him?" "I think he doesn't need fixing," Ethan said quietly. "He needs purpose." Laura studied him for a long moment before sighing. "You remind me of Miller," she said. "Same stubborn streak." Then, softer, "Don't let it kill you too." She left without another word. The door shut with a dull echo, leaving Ethan alone once more. He looked back at Odin, who was now standing, head slightly lowered, eyes fixed on him. The silence between them felt almost human. Two soldiers trapped in the wrong war. By midnight, the snow outside had grown heavier, pressing against the windows like a ghost trying to get in. Ethan sat again at the desk, flipping through Miller's personal notes that had been filed with Odin's records. The handwriting was messy but alive, the kind of writing born from sleepless nights. Odin shows unusual empathy, one line read. He senses distress before it happens. Sometimes I think he feels more than we do. Ethan smiled faintly. Yeah, I believe that. He closed the folder gently. Somewhere behind him, a faint scrape echoed, claws against metal. He turned to see Odin standing at the front of his cage, watching him with those same deep, questioning eyes. Ethan stepped closer until they were only a foot apart, glass and iron between them. Do you remember him? Ethan asked softly. Your partner? Odin tilted his head, and for an instant, something passed between them. A flicker of memory, of recognition. The dog's breath fogged the glass, and Ethan lifted his hand, pressing it against the same spot from the other side. Odin hesitated, then pressed his paw against the glass where Ethan's palm rested. The world outside vanished in that instant. No war, no orders, no fear. Just two broken souls sharing the same silence. When Ethan finally left, the snow had stopped falling. The moonlight stretched across the frozen yard, and for the first time since Miller's death, Odin lay down peacefully, his head resting between his paws. And in the quiet heart of winter, something small but undeniable began to thaw. The morning broke pale and soft over Fairview. Snow drifted lazily through the air like falling ash, painting the police compound in muted white. The cold bit deep, and the air shimmered with the faint metallic scent of frost. Inside the K9 facility, officers moved quietly, their boots squeaking on the damp floor. Ethan Cole was reviewing Odin's latest behavioral notes in the observation room when the front doors opened. The hush of snow gave way to the sound of soft footsteps and a child's voice echoing faintly down the hall. A woman entered the corridor, tall, slender, wrapped in a thick wool coat that had seen better winters. Her name was Grace Miller, and though she couldn't have been more than 32, grief had aged her eyes. They were gray-blue, the same color as the winter sky outside, with a tired kindness that came from enduring too much loss too soon. Her hair, chestnut brown and loosely tied, brushed against her cheeks as she looked around uncertainly. Her voice, when she spoke, was soft yet steady. Good morning. I'm sorry to intrude. My name is Grace Miller. I was hoping to show my daughter where her father used to work. Ethan froze. That name, Miller. His pulse quickened. Your husband was Sergeant James Miller? He asked carefully. Grace nodded, a faint smile flickering. Yes, he was with the K9 division here before the accident overseas. Behind her, a small figure peeked out. A little girl, no more than 5. Lily Miller, with bright hazel eyes and curls of golden hair spilling beneath a pink knitted hat, clutched a worn-out teddy bear to her chest. Her cheeks were flushed red from the cold, and her coat was a size too big, sleeves swallowing her hands. She had her father's curiosity in her gaze, a look that saw wonder where others saw danger. Ethan's voice softened. You're welcome to look around. I didn't know Sergeant Miller personally, but I've read his file. He was one of the best. Grace's smile wavered. He loved this place, and he loved Odin. The mention of that name carried through the hallway like a quiet spell. Odin. The dog was still confined at the far end of the wing, behind reinforced steel and tempered glass. He hadn't barked all morning. As Ethan led Grace and Lily down the corridor, Sergeant Wade Turner appeared from a side office, his heavy coat unbuttoned and his expression wary. "Visitors?" he grunted, eyeing them. Ethan nodded. "Sergeant Miller's family." Wade's face softened slightly. "Ah, the girl looks just like him," he said. Then, lowering his voice, "Keep them away from the holding wing. Odin's still unpredictable." Grace caught the name and frowned. "Odin's still here?" "Yes," Ethan replied gently. "We've been trying to rehabilitate him." Lily, who had been silently tracing her gloved fingers along the cold wall, turned her head. "Odin?" she repeated. "That's Daddy's dog." Before anyone could stop her, she started down the hall that led to the kennels. Her boots squeaked softly on the floor. "Lily, wait!" Grace called after her, panic flickering in her voice. But the little girl didn't stop. Ethan's heart lurched. He broke into a quick stride. "Stop! Don't go near that cage!" The moment Lily rounded the corner, the air changed. From behind the last set of bars, Odin lifted his massive head. His fur bristled faintly, his eyes sharp, alert. But there was no growl, no threat, only confusion. The little girl stopped just a few feet from the glass. Snowlight filtered through the window above, dusting her pink hat in a faint glow. Grace arrived seconds later, breathless, eyes wide. "Sweetheart, step away. That dog is dangerous." But Lily shook her head slowly. "He's not dangerous," she said softly, her voice steady and impossibly gentle. "He's sad." Ethan stood frozen, unable to speak, watching the impossible unfold. Lily stepped closer until she stood right before the barrier. She set her teddy bear down, looked into Odin's golden eyes, and pressed her small palm against the glass. The room held its breath. Odin didn't move at first. His muscles trembled under his thick coat. Then, with a hesitant motion, he took one slow step forward. His claws clicked faintly against the metal floor. His breath fogged the glass as he lowered his head, nostrils flaring, taking in the child's scent. "Hi," Lily whispered. "I'm Lily. My daddy said you were the bravest dog in the world." Something in that voice, light, trusting, familiar, struck through the walls of fear that had bound Odin's soul for so long. His ears lowered. A low sound escaped his throat. Not a growl, but a fragile whine, trembling and broken. Then, almost reverently, he pressed his nose against the glass where her hand rested. Grace gasped, stepping forward instinctively, but Ethan raised a hand to stop her. His voice was barely a whisper. "Don't move." The moment hung suspended, as if time itself refused to break it. The beast that had haunted every officer in the precinct stood calm, still, transformed by the presence of a child who did not fear him. Lily smiled, her breath fogging the glass. "See, Mommy? He remembers me." Tears welled in Grace's eyes. Her hands trembled. "She used to see pictures of him with James," she murmured. "She used to talk to them before bed. Maybe she—" Her voice cracked. Maybe she really thought he was still waiting for her. Ethan felt his throat tighten. He crouched down beside Lily, his gaze flicking between the girl and the dog. "You're very brave," he said gently. Lily looked up at him and grinned, missing one of her front teeth. "Daddy said brave doesn't mean not being scared. It means doing the right thing even when you are." Odin tilted his head slightly, his eyes softening. Then slowly he sat down, his posture lowering into one of quiet submission. It was the first time anyone at Fairview had seen him do it since the day he'd lost his handler. Ethan couldn't look away. He could feel something shifting, the weight of loss, the frozen grief that had held both man and dog captive for too long. It was melting, quietly, under the warmth of a child's innocence. Wade Turner arrived moments later, skidding to a stop. "What the—" He froze, seeing Odin calm and still, the girl's hand against the glass. How is this even possible? Ethan didn't answer. He just smiled faintly, eyes glinting with disbelief and awe. "Maybe," he said softly, "it's what they call a miracle." As Grace gathered her daughter into her arms, Odin gave one last soft whine, not of fear, not of pain, but of recognition. For the first time in years, there was peace in his eyes. Outside, the snowfall slowed. The wind gentled into a whisper that brushed against the windows like a sigh of relief. And within the heart of that cold, silent morning, a broken soldier and a grieving dog both found the same truth, that love never truly dies. It only waits for someone brave enough to reach through the darkness and touch it again. The blizzard rolled into Fairview like an army of ghosts. Snow slashed through the air in blinding waves, and the wind howled against the steel walls of the K9 compound. By nightfall, power lines snapped under the weight of ice, and the city drowned in darkness. Inside the training wing, the emergency lights flickered weakly, casting a cold red hue across the kennels. Odin was pacing in his cage, his claws clattering against the floor. The storm outside was no longer just weather, it was memory. Every crash of thunder was an echo of bombs. Every flash of lightning was a flash from the desert. His muscles tensed with every rumble, his chest rising and falling faster. He began to bark, low and guttural, the sound of panic buried in rage. Ethan Cole was still at the precinct, reviewing the rehabilitation footage of Odin and Lily from earlier that day. He sat in the dim light of the control room, his face drawn with exhaustion. His coffee had gone cold hours ago. When the first transformer blew, plunging the room into semi-darkness, he stood sharply, scanning the monitors as they blinked out one by one. From the far end of the corridor came a metallic clang, followed by the sound of bending steel. "No," Ethan muttered, sprinting down the hall. He reached the kennel just in time to see the reinforced latch on Odin's cage snap loose. The dog burst through the door, eyes wide with fear, fur standing on end. "Odin!" Ethan shouted, his voice barely audible above the storm's roar. The shepherd paused for a fraction of a second, ears flicking, before bolting through the open hall toward the emergency exit. Ethan chased after him, slipping on the wet concrete, shouting over the howling wind. But by the time he reached the yard, Odin was gone, a shadow swallowed by the snow. Miles away, on a deserted highway outside Fairview, a blue sedan crawled slowly through the blizzard. Inside sat Grace Miller, gripping the steering wheel so tightly her knuckles had gone white. Her breath fogged the windshield as she strained to see through the snow. "Hold on, sweetheart," she whispered to her daughter. "We're almost home." 5-year-old Lily sat in the back seat, her teddy bear clutched to her chest. She was bundled in layers of wool and pink mittens, but her voice trembled. "Mommy, I'm scared." Grace glanced at her through the rearview mirror, her heart aching. "It's just the storm, baby. We'll be fine." Then the engine sputtered. Once, twice, and died. The car coasted to a stop on the empty road. Grace tried the ignition again. Nothing. The headlights flickered and went out, leaving them in the dim orange glow of the hazard lights. "Great," she muttered under her breath, slamming her palm against the wheel. Her breath came fast, fogging the air. The cold seeped in quickly through the cracks of the old car. She grabbed her phone. No signal. Outside, the storm screamed louder. The wind tore across the highway, scattering snow in violent spirals. Then Lily's small voice broke the silence. "Mommy, look!" Grace turned. Through the white haze ahead, a dark shape was moving. Four-legged, powerful, deliberate. For an instant, she thought it was a wolf. Then the shape drew closer, and two golden eyes glinted in the headlights. "Odin?" she whispered in disbelief. The German shepherd stood in the center of the road, snow caked across his fur, his chest heaving from the run. He barked once, loud and sharp, as if commanding attention, then turned toward the tree line and barked again, shorter this time. Urgent. "What on earth?" Grace murmured. But before she could react, Lily had already unbuckled her seatbelt. "Lily, wait!" The door swung open, and freezing wind rushed in, sweeping away Grace's voice. The little girl's small boots hit the snow as she followed Odin's silhouette disappearing into the woods. Grace threw the door open and stumbled into the storm. "Lily!" she screamed, her voice lost to the wind. Inside the woods, visibility was near zero. The trees swayed under the weight of snow, creaking like old bones. Odin moved fast, his instincts burning brighter than fear. He could smell the faint trace of Lily's scent, the soft sweetness of childhood mixed with the cold sting of snow. Behind him, the girl's faint footsteps faltered. "Wait, Odin!" she cried out. Her tiny frame shivered violently. She took one step forward, then the ground cracked beneath her feet. A sharp sound split the air, the brittle snap of ice. Then came a scream. "Mommy!" Lily vanished into a pit of snow and ice, her small hands flailing as she slid into a shallow ravine. Odin spun back instantly, barking wildly, his paws digging into the ground. Without hesitation, he leapt down after her, the snow collapsing under his weight. He landed beside her, whining, his eyes wide and alert. The girl was crying, her boots tangled in the frozen roots. Odin bit gently at her coat sleeve, tugging upward. The fabric tore slightly, but he held on, his muscles strained as he dug his claws into the snow, pulling inch by inch. Snowflakes clung to his muzzle, mixing with the blood that began to trickle from a gash on his shoulder where the sharp ice had cut him. He growled low, the sound not of anger, but of defiance. The same sound he'd once made running through gunfire beside James Miller. Above them, headlights appeared through the blizzard. The rescue team. Ethan Cole's voice boomed through the snow. "Lily! Odin!" Lily's head jerked upward. "Here!" she cried weakly. "He's got me!" Ethan rushed forward, his flashlight cutting through the storm's veil. When he reached the ravine and saw what lay before him, his knees nearly gave out. Odin stood protectively over Lily, his body shaking, his fur matted with blood and ice, his teeth still clenched in the fabric of her jacket. Ethan leapt down, grabbed the girl, and pulled her into his arms. "You're okay," he breathed. "You're safe." Then he turned to Odin. The dog took one step forward, then collapsed into the snow, exhausted. Ethan caught him before he hit the ground, cradling his heavy head in his arms. "You did it, boy," he whispered, voice breaking. "You saved her." The storm howled above them, but in that frozen clearing, everything went still. Grace stumbled toward them moments later, falling to her knees beside her daughter. Tears streamed down her face, freezing instantly against her skin. Odin's breathing was ragged. Ethan could feel the heartbeat beneath his fingers, weak but steady. He pressed his forehead to the dog's. "Stay with me, soldier," he murmured. "Don't you dare quit now." Sirens wailed faintly in the distance, the rescue trucks closing in. The lights painted the forest red and blue, reflecting off the snow like shattered glass. By the time they loaded Odin into the emergency van, Lily was holding his paw gently, whispering something only he could hear. Ethan sat beside them, one hand on the dog's shoulder, watching the snow begin to ease. As the doors closed, the wind outside softened to a hush, and in that fragile silence, Fairview took its first breath after the storm. The storm had long passed, but Fairview still wore its scars. Snow lay thick on the rooftops, heavy and quiet, while the streets shimmered with slush that glowed faintly under the pale morning sun. Inside the Fairview Veterinary Recovery Center, the world was softer. The hum of machines, the faint smell of antiseptic, the steady rhythm of a heart monitor. On a narrow steel table lay Odin, wrapped in white bandages that stood out against his dark, mottled fur. His chest rose and fell shallowly, each breath a battle fought in silence. Ethan Cole stood at the edge of the room, his posture rigid, his hands tucked into the pockets of his brown jacket. He hadn't slept in 2 days. His face bore the exhaustion of someone who had carried too much guilt and too little rest. The doctor, Dr. Samuel Bennett, a man in his late 50s with thinning gray hair and a gentle voice, adjusted the IV drip. His round glasses slipped down the bridge of his nose as he spoke quietly. "He's lucky, you know. Most dogs wouldn't have survived that blood loss. But this one," he smiled faintly. "He's got something else keeping him alive." Ethan's voice was low. "Will he walk again?" Dr. Bennett hesitated. "Too soon to tell. The wound on his shoulder is deep, torn muscle, a few cracked ribs, but his vitals are strong. Whatever drives him, it's not giving up." Ethan nodded, eyes still fixed on the dog. "He's a Marine," he said softly, half to himself. "He just doesn't know it." A knock came from the doorway. Grace Miller entered quietly, her hair tied back, her face pale but warm. She wore a long beige coat, slightly dusted with snow, and in her arms she carried Lily, bundled in a red scarf, cheeks flushed from the cold. The little girl's eyes widened when she saw Odin. She slipped from her mother's arms and tiptoed to the side of the table. "Hey, boy," she whispered, her small hand trembling as it reached for his paw. "You did it." Odin's ears twitched faintly, the only sign of life. Then slowly, his eyes fluttered open. They were glassy at first, unfocused, but when they met hers, they cleared. 2 golden embers lighting in the cold. A soft whine escaped him, weak but certain. Grace covered her mouth, tears filling her eyes. "Oh my God." Ethan turned away slightly, blinking hard. His jaw flexed as he exhaled through his nose. Dr. Bennett smiled, his voice low. "Seems he found his reason to stay." Lily leaned closer, her voice soft as snow. "Daddy would be proud of you, Odin." The dog blinked once, and in that silence, something sacred hung in the air, as if her words reached beyond the living. Days turned into weeks. Odin's recovery became the heartbeat of the precinct. Officers came by between shifts, leaving treats, toys, even handwritten notes near his kennel. The same men who once called him the Beast now spoke his name with respect. Ethan visited every morning and evening, sometimes staying late into the night, sitting on the cold tile floor beside Odin's cage, reading old case files aloud, anything to fill the quiet. One afternoon, Captain Laura Brenner entered the recovery room. She wore her usual dark uniform, crisp and immaculate, her hair tied back in a tight bun. Yet for once, her expression carried warmth. "I heard he's walking again," she said. Ethan rose from the floor, wiping his hands on his jeans. A little, slow but steady. Laura crossed her arms, studying the pair, the man and the dog. You've done something no one else could, Cole. You gave him back his purpose. Ethan gave a small, tired smile. He gave me mine. Laura's eyes softened. There's going to be a ceremony next week. The department's planning to honor him officially. Medal of Courage, post-duty recognition. I want you there. Ethan hesitated, glancing at Odin, who lay with his head resting on his paws. I'll be there, he said finally. When the day came, the snow had begun to melt. Fairview's streets were slick with puddles, and the air carried that fleeting smell of thaw, the scent of things coming back to life. In the courtyard of the precinct, an American flag flapped gently above the small crowd gathered beneath. Officers stood in neat rows, their uniforms pressed, boots shining. The wind brushed across their faces like a blessing. At the center stood Odin. His fur, though still patchy where the stitches ran, gleamed in the sunlight. A polished silver badge hung from his new collar, engraved with one word: valor. His stance was proud but calm, his head high beside Ethan, who knelt slightly to keep a steady hand on his back. Captain Brenner stepped forward with the microphone. Her voice was clear, steady. Today we honor not just a K-9 officer, but a reminder of what courage truly means. Odin, once feared, has shown us that redemption can live even in the darkest winters. He didn't just save a child. He saved our faith in what loyalty looks like. Applause rippled through the crowd. Grace stood near the front, her eyes glistening. Lily clapped with all the energy her small hands could muster, her scarf trailing behind her in the breeze. Ethan bent close to Odin and whispered, "You did it, soldier. You found your way home." The ceremony ended as the sun began to dip, painting the snow in shades of gold and rose. Officers dispersed slowly, their laughter echoing softly between the brick walls. Grace and Lily approached. The little girl crouched beside Odin, pressing her cheek against his neck. "You're shiny now," she giggled, tapping the silver badge. Grace smiled gently. "He's earned it." She looked at Ethan. "You both have." For the first time in a long while, Ethan allowed himself to laugh. Quiet, genuine. The sound seemed to melt what was left of the winter between them. As evening fell, the courtyard grew still. The flag rustled softly overhead. Lily sat on the steps, her head resting against Odin's side, eyes half closed. Ethan stood a few feet away, watching them with quiet reverence. He looked up toward the fading sky, his voice a whisper carried on the cold air. Maybe God sent him here for a reason, to show us that even in the coldest places, love can still burn bright. Odin stirred slightly, as if he heard. His tail gave a small, slow wag. Beside him, Lily smiled in her sleep. And for the first time since the war, Ethan felt something thaw inside his chest. The kind of warmth that could only come from faith, forgiveness, and the silent loyalty of a soul that had once been lost but found its way home. Final message. The miracle that melts. Winter. Sometimes, God doesn't send miracles with thunder or light. He sends them softly, in the form of a wounded soldier who learns to love again, in the quiet loyalty of a dog who never forgets his master, and in the small, fearless heart of a child who reminds the broken that hope still breathes. Odin's story isn't just about survival, it's about redemption, the way light finds its way through even the deepest snow. And maybe, just maybe, it's God's way of whispering to us that even when life feels frozen, love will always find a way to thaw it. So tonight, As you finish watching this story, take a moment to look around at your family, your pets, your friends, the small blessings you might overlook. Because sometimes, the miracle you're waiting for is already beside you, wagging its tail. If this story touched your heart, please share it. Leave a comment telling us where you're watching from, and subscribe for more stories of faith, courage, and the hidden miracles God weaves into everyday life. May God bless you and your loved ones, and may His warmth guide you through every storm, until every winter in your heart finally melts.